Loss event management is a key component of any GRC solution. IBM OpenPages facilitates loss event management throughout the entire life cycle, from the entry of events, increasing the accessibility of the entry of these events through a very intuitive interface accessible by all employees at the company if needed, and then through the entire life cycle from associating the event itself to relevant risks, categorizing the event appropriately for the ability to assess and analyze the events against like categorized risk, and you have the optional ability to utilize cognitive capabilities to standardize the categorization of those events. Triaging the event to determine the full impact that this event has on the company through recovery and impact analysis, all facilitated through an OpenPages native workflow engine. Firstly, we need to get the loss event entered into the system. There are a number of ways to enter a loss event into OpenPages, but what we'll do is we'll highlight the loss event entry application. This is an application, a licensed application that allows a company to be able to allow their employees with no limit to be able to enter observations, events in a very intuitive interface. And so by selecting this URL, I can now enter the event or any of the information that I've observed. So we see a very intuitive interface where we can navigate through this very easily. I can take a look at my contact information, which I've pre-populated here, and I can click continue as an example to go to the next section. In this case, the description. Maybe I observed an employee accepting kickbacks, and I want to get that reported for proper triaging and escalation or whatever may occur. And any information I understand about this event I can populate here, and unless it's a required field, I can leave everything else blank. So maybe what happened, I observed an email, and then just put any information I have, and I'll click continue to continue putting the information I have. Any categorization about this event, I'll leave this blank. Maybe this will be populated further on down by the event owner. Discovery date is a required field. We see that with the red asterisk, meaning I do need to populate that value. And yes, I observed this on the 1st of November, and I'll put that information in there. Finally, in this first section for event, the primary caused entity, some of the other business unit specific information, and I'm going to go ahead and select North America Finance. That's the business unit I am a part of, and this is, so I'd like to go ahead and at least select that business unit as the primary caused entity. And then I can basically navigate through the rest of these sections on the loss event entry app. Do I have any evidence I'd like to attach? Do I actually have any insight on the actual loss impacts? At this point, most likely not this early in the event, so I'll also go past that. Same thing with the recoveries. We'll interact with those later. Preview and submit. It gives a summary of the event, at which point I can submit the event and then go on about my day. At this point in time, the OpenPages native workflow engine is going to take this event and intelligently route it to the appropriate user based on any characteristics of the event. It could be the description, could be any information I've provided. So let's actually log on now to OpenPages. I've been notified with an email, or I'll actually see it on my home page that I have a new workflow task. So if we access the system as the user who's been assigned this event, the ORM user, the ORM user's homepage, which should be personalized to how this user interacts with OpenPages, we see loss events, recently entered loss events 1, and that is most likely the event that was just entered. So, but what we'll do, since this was a workflow-driven notification, I will also be notified via my tasks, and I see the event that was just entered via the event application entry application has represented to me as this workflow task. So I'll select it and it takes me to the event information, and this is where I can really populate and update this event and triage it appropriately with a very analytical and task-driven view. So we see some user guidance over to the right, which gives me some information about what I'm expected to do at this point. Please review the following loss events, so on and so forth. Any key fields, including key fields that are required that have not been populated. We can tell a current start date, for example, is one of those. And so let's go ahead and just start exploring this event. We see the basic information that was populated by the user who entered the event earlier. The event categorization. What I can do is triaging this event is perhaps I will identify what risk category and subcategory this event should be associated with. And if we're utilizing Watson Natural Language Classifier, then we can have Watson trained in our taxonomy to actually provide suggestions on how this, in this case, this event should be categorized. And with 96% confidence rating, it recommends internal fraud, theft, and fraud. And as the user, I'll agree with that, and I'll select that value, and now they're pre-populated. So the event has been properly categorized for the sake of being able to, for example, compare it to like-minded risks, or I should say like categorized risks, such as all risks that are of type internal fraud. Causal category and subcategory useful for root cause analysis of the event, which again could be populated at a later date. Through my research, I determined that the current start date was also on the 1st of November. I'll go ahead and save the changes there. And what other information here that I might want to populate over the course of triaging this event is the context to this event. This is important, where I'd like to maybe, for example, associate all of the relevant risks that this event should be associated to. Those risk owners would like to know that there's an event relevant to their respective risks that has been captured, so they can see that event in their respective risk task views when they, for example, are assessing those risks. Again, I could utilize Watson to assist with the association, but in this case, I'll just say, show me all risks that are in North America for all risks that are currently awaiting assessment that have something to do with fraud. And after I put in those searches, one risk is returned, risk 8 in North America commercial banking. You see it's an internal fraud risk. So I'll select that risk, and now that risk owner, ORM user, who happens to be myself, I will see this event associated with this risk whenever I'm in risk activities or in the risk task view. Finally, we can then come up to the respective impacts and recoveries. Impacts could be the actual losses, could be direct losses, indirect losses that are going to contribute to the gross loss and the net loss. And the recoveries could be actual recoveries gained, and they could be in separate business units as well, insurance recoveries, things like that. We'll just enter in a loss impact for this demonstration. So at some point I realized that, we actually lost a direct loss of $25,000 based on litigation costs. So I'll just say litigation costs and any other information that I want to populate in this actual impact I'm creating, but at the very least I do need to provide the actual loss. And as I said, this is $25,000. And again, if, for example, there could be some information regarding what type of loss this is. Is it a direct loss? Is it an indirect loss? Is it a near miss? All of that information can be captured over the course of triaging this event. So now that I've identified this respective impact, if we go back to the event, loss event itself on the breadcrumb trail up here, we can now see that there is a net and gross loss of $25,000. They're the same because we haven't identified any recoveries yet. We also see that I have the ability now to submit this for L1 approval. In other words, the action menu materialized because I've completed all prerequisites for moving this loss event as far as how it's defined in our native workflow engine to the next level of approval. And although I'm not showing the workflow, the event's gross loss, the size of that gross loss determines if it requires one level of approval, 2 levels of approval, or no approval. So we know that it requires at least 1 level for approval because that is the option I have under my actions. So I'll select continue, and then I, as the ORM user, have completed triage in this event. I can then go about my day, and the event will now go through the review and approval process as defined in the workflow. So we've identified the event and entered it through a very intuitive loss event entry application. The event owner was able to intelligently triage the event through the task-based views with the assistance of Watson for categorization and searching for relevant risks. And then the workflow engine was to ensure the integrity of the event by ensuring that all prerequisite information was entered before it was intelligently routed for approval to the appropriate approver. Thank you very much.